Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church in Columbia, South Carolina, where we're part of the ELCA. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. Sometimes we think we know what a word means, but we aren't always correct. An example of this I have used with you before is the word prodigal, like in the parable Jesus told that we call the prodigal son. As I was growing up, I didn't know the word prodigal, and I always presumed that it meant someone who ran away or was wayward. It turns out that isn't what the word means at all. Rather, it means wastefully extravagant. And it speaks about how the boy wasted his inheritance. Now, I think there are other prodigals in that story, too. The older son was wastefully extravagant with all the blessings he had with his father, and the father was wastefully extravagant with his love for these two nasty boys. I never understood the depth of this parable until I knew the real meaning of the word prodigal. This week we are looking at words we use in church, but nowhere else. There are lots of these words, and I talked about the word narthex that kicked off the idea for this week. Today we are going to move on to some other words, starting with nave. The nave is the place of assembly where the congregation gathers to worship. Put succinctly, the nave is the area of a church where the congregation sits. The word is derived from a Latin word which means ship, and I remember as I grew up someone pointed out that if you turn the building upside down, it's fairly easy to picture the whole thing like a ship. You can hear the root of this same word in navy or naval. In fact, the word nave is meant to symbolize the church sailing on the oceans of time. Some churches are even built with ceilings to resemble ships' timbers to accentuate this theme. In this area of the church, you'll find pews for sitting and an aisle to allow for processions and for people to come forward to receive communion. This area is often called the sanctuary, but actually that term is wrong. We'll talk about the sanctuary along with the chancel in a moment. The nave is simply the area for the gathered congregation. As we gather, we are sailors on a spiritual voyage. So, let's move a little further into the church building as we consider the chancel. Typically, the chancel is the raised platform at the front of the nave. Most of the worship is led from this space, and it contains both the altar and the pulpit. That's important because when you walk into a church, you are meant to see most prominently both word and sacrament. Word most visible through the pulpit, sacrament through the altar and baptismal font. While we tend to call the whole building the sanctuary is really the part of the chancel immediately surrounding the altar. For example, in many church buildings, the area inside the altar rail. You might also find it interesting that during communion, it is understood that the surface of the altar extends to the altar rail, so that as we kneel there, we are indeed kneeling at the altar of God. Fair linen. Redeemer's altar is 12 feet long, so it's a big altar. On top of that altar is a long cloth called the fair linen. It is the most important of the altar linens because it represents the burial cloth in which Jesus' body was wrapped after his crucifixion. The word fair refers to the fine quality and cleanliness of the linen. The fair linen covers the entire surface of the altar and down the sides, and on the top are embroidered 5 crosses, one in each corner and one in the center. These crosses are to represent the 5 wounds Jesus received on the cross: 2 wounds from the nails in his hands, 2 wounds in his feet, and the spear that was thrust in his side. The vestment that I wear on Sundays is called an alb, but frankly, that's a pretty recent development. I remember my father wearing a black robe called a cassock, and on top of that he wore a white covering called a surplice. This was a statement meant to reflect sin covered over with the righteousness of Christ. His robes reflected law and gospel that way. The alb is a more simple garment, meant to evoke a simple shepherd's robe. That's the job of a pastor, to care for God's flock in compassion and love. That's what you should see when you see our robes: care and compassion for God's flock. Thanks for sharing these moments with me, and remember to let this day belong to God.